We've got a nice quiet Sunday morning. Quiet except for the chickens talking, but that's a sound that we really enjoy. But the meaningful quiet is the lack of road noise today. Sundays tend to be pretty low traffic, and it's Mother's Day, so it's a little quieter all the way around. I thought it'd be a nice opportunity to do some updates in the front area, which is normally just slammed with traffic sound, and take a look at specifically our living wall that is along the road here. I'm sure there'll be some interruptions with cars here or there, and I'll just pause when they're driving by. But let's see how it's waking up here in the spring of 2023. If the idea of the living wall is brand new to you, check out, there's a playlist where I've been documenting this since the beginning, which is probably 7 years now, something along that line, 8 years. You can look back to the first video. I'm just going to talk while the cars drive by. Even though it's supposed to be a quiet Sunday, there's definitely still cars, and definitely a major reason for the inspiration to do this in the first place is to give ourselves a little bit of a boundary between the intensity of the road and our sweet little spot there. And you can see there's definitely a solid break where the driveway is. That's out of necessity. That has to remain open for our vehicles and for safety. But then the areas between the road and the chicken yard have been filling out pretty immensely over the years. There's a spring lull in the density of the living wall because the Miscanthus grass, which are down in here, we'll take a closer look at them. While they're getting up to speed in the spring, it can be a little bit gappy. We've got woven old Miscanthus stalks in the fence, but those are starting to fade, so there'll need to be another layer of design soon. The space has really gone through a successional arc. It's been slowly moving up into actually being a treed or a canopied system, which is beautiful in its own right, but it starts to lose some of the functionality that was initially designed into it. Having these trees so tall does not block the road, but it does create a bit nicer of a context for birds. There's wind barrier in having taller trees up there. The northernmost end of this, which is what I'm looking at here, the black locust and the hybrid poplars, those are okay to be very tall since they're just casting shade onto the road. That's not a big deal at all. But what I've learned is that with the complexity of plants that are in here, the character of the Miscanthus grass, the giant Miscanthus, that are popping up again. You can see they're in the shade right now, and because the trees have gotten so much taller and there's such density in here, the Miscanthus is having a little bit of a harder time keeping up. It may very well be that in the long run, this plant, the grasses that are all through here, might fade out of the system. That remains to be determined, but I think we'd have to do some pretty seriously hard cuts on the trees around them to get enough light to have the Miscanthus be pretty significantly happy in here. To me, that's reminder 10,000,007 to, in general, make designs that include as many species as possible in order to achieve goals. So our primary goal was to have less visual interaction with the road, and Miscanthus was a really great candidate early on, and now I think we need to work with more vining layers and more shrub layers, and ultimately have those be a bit more shade tolerant. The window is certainly closed to bring the canopy down on some of these taller trees. I don't think it would be nice to them at this point. Maybe in the late fall we can reassess and see if we can cut some of the black locust into a pollard and the hybrid poplar into a lower cut. But we've got now these willows. These are a variegated willow that we added that had a really hard time early on because the Miscanthus was so dominant. But now that the Miscanthus is weakening, I feel like these willows are starting to thicken out a bit more, and this might do some seriously strong work in blocking the view from the road in the years to come. On the northeast corner, I talked recently about a cutting scenario that I did here. I can link here to that, where I took this stand of trees that were along the east north corner here and brought a fair number of them down to between 4 feet and 6 feet or so. And I explained in that video the logic behind that was to encourage them to leaf out lower. So here's some alders responding really positively to those hard cuts with lots of new fresh growth. This will fill out to be so strong right in here. And as rough as it looks, it was actually very stimulating. For example, here's curly willow, and this is all new growth that sprung out since that hard cut. Likewise, this One here, you can see all the new shoots and lots of buds swelling. It's going to fill out quite a bit. It's also really helpful to have done such a hard cut there because now a lot more light can pour through and help support the growth of the keystones in here, like this English walnut. I think we would do well at this point to consider along this tree line to add a shade-tolerant vining element. My thoughts go pretty early on to Cassandra. I think it's a more gentle perennial vine than a hardy kiwi. Maybe an Arctic kiwi could be a nice fit to weave through and really fill things out. Air potato is certainly very expansive and pretty much a wild card, but that's kind of this scene, so maybe it would work well. We did some trials with Cassandra to test just how shade tolerant they can be. And so deep under the shade of this big oak tree is some Cassandra along the fence line of our chicken yard. And the vine leafs out very early and seems incredibly content with the amount of light it's getting in here, which is next to nothing. You can see some flowers getting ready to form, and so we may very well be able to harvest some delicious, complex flavored fruit and medicine from here, and whatever drops on the inside can be for our hens. I think this will be a plant we try to expand quite a bit. Overall, it's really sweet to see how many of these different characters that have been added in. Maybe they're not exactly thriving, maybe they're not at peak performance, but they're content enough and they're doing great work. Structural and species diversity, as per always just about, has revealed itself as being a neat pathway to having what I think is quite a beautiful, but that's certainly very resilient and certainly a very malleable way to keep this fence evolving. It's certainly patchy in areas, so the vining layer will be the next layer of development in here, as well as the shade-tolerant shrubs. But in the meantime, it's offering a whole lot of value in a whole lot of different ways for the wildlife. They don't mind that it's a little spotty. On the other side of the driveway, we're trialing so many different things. A real showstopper in my mind is this rhubarb right next to the road. It definitely gets some very gooey, nasty stuff, so we're not harvesting any of this, but it's tempting. My gosh, it loves it. It loves it well-drained, full sun. It's crazy how big those stalks got. I think I'll expand this rhubarb quite a bit. Anywhere that there's grass might as well be rhubarb. It even seems to do better than the comfrey that's here. We planted a bunch of daffodils to mark the boundary of where cars can pull off the road, but that doesn't last during the summer, so I think rhubarb might actually start to be more of a ground covering character in here. Thimbleberry's doing a great job of being able to hang out underneath. It gets some good sun early in the morning and then shade for most of the day. It doesn't get tall enough to do the visual barrier work that we need, but it's a beautiful low-level shade element as an understory. It's sweet to see how well Redbud is functioning in here. It's just such an incredibly beautiful flower. We didn't plant these, they just showed up. It's neat how often nature gets involved in the design process and helps keep the ego in check, because it would be sweet for me to say I designed Redbud into here. It's a really beautiful addition. Nitrogen fixation, beautiful flowers in the spring, capable in the understory, but nope, maybe a bird pooped a seed in, or maybe it just flew in with some mulch. This side is exhibiting the same issue as the other side in a little bit more of an intense way. The need to bring the canopy down is presenting in a really strong way. Ran out of time to cut the curly willows back, to cut them really hard. I think in the fall we'll have to take these curly willows and some of the other ones and cut them very, very low and have the resprouts fill out in here. But in the meantime, some other characters like Aronia, they seem to be okay in here, but I don't suspect that they're thriving. The elderberry would like a bit more sun. I had some time to cut them back, and as a result, we got very strong, deep green growth right where we'd want it. But I could have done a better job of cutting them back more. I tend to only cut them when we're harvesting cuttings for shipping, but I would do well to kind of get past that and just make some hard cuts. Maybe I'll offer up some free cuttings in the fall to folks who want to help with that. Again, where I made the time to do a hard cut, here, Curly Willow is getting ready to send up 1 million shoots. We'll have to thin these a bit, but that's an easy process. You kind of just go through and pluck some of the shoots. I'll let this go for a while before I do that and thin it down to maybe 5 to 10 shoots. And this hybrid poplar that was cut a little ways back early in the spring, you can see the new buds. Once you get an eye for it, you realize, oh, this is going to fill out immensely. This will be a very serious amount of green growth very soon. This was a poplar that got a hard cut last year. You can see the cut what happened there, and this is all the regrowth. Those buds we just looked at turned into these shoots. And again, having done that, now we get the visual barrier where we need it. So all season, this area is actually really filled out. So I'm learning the lesson. I know what I need to do. It's just a matter of making the time, and in some ways getting over what feels like a harsh cut. It will actually be really stimulating if I could commit to most of this coming down to here so it can fill out to here. The traffic seems to be picking up even though it's Sunday on a Mother's Day, reminding me yet again why we want to have more and more plants between us and this road. But I should get started with the day. Let me know if you've got questions or concerns or comments, ideas, suggestions. All those things are welcome.